11:16 a.m. The morning Esperanza Villalba unfolded the wedding dress for the last time. She did it slowly, with both hands, as if the gesture deserved more time than she had. She spread it out on the bed, looked at it for a moment, folded it again, and placed it in the paper bag she had prepared the night before. Then she went to wake her children. Welcome to Historias Entre Vidas. The dress had been her mother's before it was hers. Ivory-colored organza fabric that yellowed at the edges with that dignity belonging to things that age well. Lace at the collar and cuffs that someone had sewn by hand with a patience Esperanza never knew who possessed. She had worn it only once. In the parish church of Pátzcuaro in Michoacán on a Saturday in April 12 years ago. When Celestino Villalba took her hand before Father Gregorio and promised things he kept for as long as he could. Celestino died 2 years ago. An accident on the dirt road between the cornfield and the village. A curve he knew by heart, but which that afternoon was wet from the rain and didn't forgive. They found him the next day. Esperanza was 36 years old, with 2 children. A 3-hectare rain-fed plot on the outskirts of Pátzcuaro, and a debt with the Ejidos cooperative that Celestino had left unpaid because death doesn't give notice, so one can settle one's accounts. The children were named Simone, 11, and Petra, 8. Simone had the seriousness of children who understand too soon that something has changed and that the change isn't going to reverse itself. Petra had the resilience of those who don't yet fully understand, which is its own form of wisdom. The land was the only thing that remained clean. Celestino had inherited it from his father, debt-free, with a registered title, and that was the most valuable thing he could have left to Esperanza because it was the only thing no one could take from her without her signature. But land without seeds is just dirt. And seeds cost money. And the rainy season doesn't wait for one to resolve one's finances. Esperanza had sought a loan in 3 places. The Ejidos cooperative wouldn't lend her more because she already had an outstanding debt. The bank in the municipal seat asked for guarantees she couldn't offer. And the only private lender in the village charged interest she recognized immediately as the kind of solution that turns one problem into 2. That was when she thought of the dress. The woman who bought old clothing and fabric at the Pátzcuaro market was named Doña Amparo, and when Esperanza placed the paper bag on her counter and pulled out the dress with both hands, Doña Amparo received it with the silent respect of someone who recognizes something that has history. She examined it slowly. Then she named a price. Esperanza didn't haggle. Not because the price was fair, which it wasn't entirely, but because the time of the season was not the time for haggling. She took the money, tucked it into her rebozo, and went out to the market to buy native corn seeds, bean seeds, and whatever was left for a load of fertilizer. On the way back to the land, with her 2 children walking one on each side and the sacks of seeds in the borrowed wheelbarrow, Simone asked without looking at her, "Aren't we going to have grandmother's dress anymore?" "No more," said Esperanza. "Did you sell it for the seeds?" "Yes." Simone walked a stretch in silence. Then he said, "It's all right. Grandmother would have done the same." Esperanza didn't answer. But she tightened her fingers around the wheelbarrow's rope and thought that this 11-year-old boy understood more than she had taught him, which is the kind of thought that breaks a mother's heart with pride and sadness at the same time. What none of the 3 of them knew, as they walked along the dirt road with the seeds in the wheelbarrow and the Michoacán sun above, was that the land they were going to sow held something that was going to change the nature of everything they thought they had. The land was on the lower part of a gentle hill, with an access path flanked by 2 old pirul trees that Celestino had planted the year he inherited it because he said the entrance to a piece of land deserved to be announced. At the back, where the slope began to descend toward the gully. There was a patch of grass greener than the rest that Esperanza had always noticed, without asking herself why. Because when one has much to do, one doesn't always have time for the questions that don't seem urgent. That green patch was the first sign. The second was found by Simon. He was clearing the weeds at the back of the land with the hoe, with that diligence of a boy who wants to prove he can. When the hoe struck something that was neither earth nor stone, but something in between, a hollow, dull sound that made Simon stop and call his mother with the seriousness of someone who doesn't know what he's found, but knows he's found something. Esperanza came, took the hoe, and began to carefully clear the earth around the spot. Half a meter down, the hoe touched wood. Old, dark wood, but solid. She kept clearing with her hands when the hoe was no longer useful, pushing aside damp earth, until what it was appeared, the cover of a wood and adobe structure, round, about 2 meters in diameter, that someone had built with craftsmanship and had covered with earth decades ago. A cistern, an old cistern built by hand that time had buried beneath layers of earth and that the land had been keeping the way, places that have seen generations pass keep things, without making noise, without announcing itself, waiting for someone to have a reason to look for it. Petra, who had been watching from behind, asked, "What is it?" "Water," said Esperanza. And in that word fit everything the discovery meant, which was much more than fit into a single word, but which for the moment was enough. Esperanza didn't sleep well that night. Not from anguish, but from that kind of sleeplessness produced by thought that cannot be paused. The kind that goes from one consequence to the next without stopping. If the cistern held water, the land had irrigation. If the land had irrigation, it didn't depend on the rainy season. If it didn't depend on the rainy season, she could plant twice a year instead of once. If she planted twice a year, the debt with the cooperative was solvable. If the debt was solvable, the rest was too. The next day, she went to see the municipal engineer, a young man named Burgoa, who attended at the town hall on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and who had a reputation for answering without complicating things. She described what she had found. Engineer Burgoa asked her 3 technical questions, noted the answers in his notebook, and said he would come to the land on Friday. Friday he arrived on time, with his field boots and a metal rod with which he probed the cistern from several angles before saying anything. Then he straightened up, took off his hat, and said with the sobriety of someone who delivers good news without exaggerating it, "The cistern is intact. It has filtration from the water table. That means it recharges on its own. The water level is good for the dry season. If you condition it properly, this land has permanent irrigation." Esperanza looked at him. "Permanent?" "Permanent," repeated the engineer. "In this area there are landowners who have spent years buying water trucks for irrigation. You have it on your own land and didn't know it." Simon, who had heard everything from the nearest pirul tree, climbed down from the branch where he was without making a sound, and stood next to his mother without saying anything. Esperanza felt his shoulder against hers. "How much is that worth?" she asked. Engineer Burgoa looked at her honestly. "More than you think." What the Ejido's neighbors didn't take long to learn, because in the villages of Michoacán, good news travels almost as fast as bad, was that the widow Villalba's land had its own water. And what the neighbors knew, the Ejido commissioner also knew. And what the Ejido commissioner knew reached the ears of Don Fulgencio Bravo, who was the man with the most hectares in the Ejido, and who had the habit of interesting things ending up his in one way or another. Don Fulgencio arrived at the land on a Tuesday morning, unannounced, with his felt hat and his new pickup truck and a nephew who accompanied him everywhere, for no apparent reason beyond the accompanying. He found Esperanza preparing the furrows for planting with Simone beside her. He greeted her with the affability of someone who has something to propose and wants the other person to be in good spirits when he proposes it. He spoke to her about the land with calculated admiration, about the cistern with an astonishment that wasn't entirely genuine, because he already knew too much to be astonished. And then, with the naturalness of someone saying something reasonable, he said he would be willing to buy the land at a fair price, that she could resolve her situation once and for all, that a woman alone with 2 children had other ways of getting ahead that didn't involve working the land without help. A woman alone can't manage land with a cistern, said the nephew, who spoke when it wasn't his turn. It's too much to administer alone. Esperanza didn't answer immediately. She kept marking the furrow with the hoe, finished the line she had started, and then straightened up and looked at them with her hands on the tool's handle. Don Fulgencio, she said, my husband died 2 years ago, and since then I have administered this land. I have partially paid the debt with the cooperative. I have supported my children, and I have found a cistern that has spent decades waiting for someone to find it. All of that I did alone. So when your nephew says that a woman alone cannot, I'm curious to know where he got that information. Now, Don Fulgencio smiled with the discomfort of someone who wasn't expecting that answer. No one doubts your capability, Señora Esperanza. It's only an offer. And I thank you for it, said Esperanza. But this land is not for sale. Neither is the cistern. And if that ever changes, you will be the last to know, because it will be my decision, and I'm not going to consult with anyone who comes uninvited to tell me what I can and cannot do. Don Fulgencio adjusted his hat. He looked at the nephew. The nephew looked at the truck. They drove off down the dirt road, kicking up dust between the 2 pyrrole trees at the entrance. And Petra, who had been hiding behind the right pyrrole the whole time, came out with wide eyes. Mom, did you beat them? There was no fight, Petra, but they left. Yes. Petra considered it. Then yes, you beat them. There are dignities that cannot be bought with money or inherited with a surname. They are built furrow by furrow, decision by decision, on the days when it would be easier to give in, and one does not give in, because one knows that what one has is worth more than what is offered. By the time the first rains of June arrived, the cistern was conditioned with the help of engineer Burgoa, who had arranged a municipal grant for the technical work Esperanza couldn't have paid for alone. And the first furrows of native corn had already been germinated for 3 weeks, with a green that was different from that of the rain-fed plots. Firmer, darker, the green of a plant that knows it won't lack water. The debt with the cooperative was settled in August. With the first corn sale of the season, and with the sale of part of the cistern's water to 2 Ejido neighbors who needed it for their own irrigation, and who paid a price agreed before the commissioner, so everything would be in order. The receipt of debt cancellation Esperanza placed in the wooden box where she kept the land's documents, next to the title of ownership and next to the photograph of Celestino she always kept in that same place. Simone saw it. He said nothing. But that night before sleeping, he asked, "We don't owe anything anymore? We don't owe anything anymore." The boy thought about it for a moment, with his eyes open on the ceiling. "And grandmother's dress?" Esperanza took a second. That one already did what it had to do. "Do you think she's angry?" "I think she bought her own seeds more than once when she had to," said Esperanza. "And I think she would be happy that ours produced." Simone closed his eyes. Petra had already been asleep for a while, with that ease of those who sleep without pending debts. Doña Amparo, the woman from the market who had bought the dress, appeared one October afternoon at the land without Esperanza having invited her. She arrived with a cloth bag and an expression Esperanza couldn't quite read until the woman took out of the bag Chadille, the ivory-colored organza dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, folded with care, and placed it in her hands. "I'm returning it to you," said Doña Amparo, "without charging you anything." Esperanza looked at the dress. She looked at her. "Why?" Doña Amparo adjusted her rebozo. "Because when you came to my stall that day, I knew that dress cost you more than it cost. And because I heard about the cistern, and about the debt, and about the bravos who came to offer to buy the land, and you sent them back the way they came." She paused. "There are things one can do when one has the opportunity. This is what I can do." Esperanza held the dress against her chest for a moment. She thought of her mother. She thought of the parish in Pátzcuaro, and the Saturday in April, and Celestino taking her hand. She thought of the corn furrows and the cistern water that didn't run out. "Thank you," she said. And it was the kind of thank you that fits whole in a single word when the word is true enough. One Sunday in November, they set up a table beneath the pirul trees at the land's entrance, with Ejido neighbors who arrived with food without anyone organizing them, which is the best way for the people who matter to arrive. There were tamales with poblano strips and guava atole, and Doña Refugio's goat cheese and tortillas that Petra helped make for the first time with an apprentice's seriousness that made 3 women smile at once. The corn from the land was harvested and stored in the granary that Simón and Engineer Burgoa had repaired together one Saturday in October, with new planks and old will. Engineer Burgoa arrived at sunset and sat next to Esperanza with a plate of tamales and the quiet satisfaction of someone who did something useful and doesn't need to be told he did it. "What are you going to plant next year?" he asked. "Corn and beans in half," said Esperanza. "And in the other half, I want to try tomatoes. With permanent water, it's possible." The engineer nodded. "It's possible." "Will you help me with the irrigation design?" "Yes." Simón was next to the cistern, which now had a new wooden cover with iron hinges that he himself had sanded, looking at it with the expression of someone who feels he understands something he didn't understand before. Petra ran past him with her new friends from the Ejido, and he let her pass without taking his eyes off the cistern. Esperanza saw him from the table. She went over to where he was, stood next to him, and the two of them looked at the cistern for a moment in silence. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That the water was here the whole time," said Simón. "And we didn't know." Esperanza thought of the organza dress, now kept in the wooden box next to the title of ownership and the photograph of Celestino. She thought of the furrows. She thought of the price she had taken without haggling because time wouldn't wait, and of what that price had bought, and of what the land had given back without anyone asking it. "That happens sometimes," she said. "Good things wait until one is ready to find them. Sometimes life pushes us toward the most desperate moments to take us exactly where we need to arrive." Esperanza Villalba sold the most valuable thing she had to buy seeds. And the land she sowed with those seeds gave back water she didn't know existed. And with that water she built what no debt and no man with a felt hat could take from her. A future that was completely hers. That isn't luck. That is what happens when a person doesn't let go of what is theirs, even when it costs to carry it. Have you ever had to let go of something you loved in order to receive what you needed? If this story touched something in your heart, leave your comment below. Tell us from what part of Mexico or wherever you're watching us from today. Subscribe to the Historias Entrevidas channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single story. Share this story with someone who is in the middle of a difficult moment and needs to be reminded that sometimes what seems like a loss is the beginning of something we cannot yet see. Until the next story, a heart-to-heart embrace. The water was here the whole time, Esperanza said to the land one morning, alone, before the children arrived, with the Michoacan cold above and the cistern shining at the back of the land. Someone just needed a reason to look for it.